Hi, I'm Rachel with Patterns and Pixels Canada, and on today's episode, I'm going to continue working on my curved seams quilt. So I quickly just checked my emails. I first started this quilt 6 months ago when I went on a workshop for how to sew curves. We were told to bring 16 fat quarters with us on the day, and you would sew until the day finished or until you finished your blocks. I did not finish my blocks, not even close. So when I went to the sewing retreat this past September, I thought, okay, well that's fine. I'll take this with me and I'll get it finished there. And I did do a few more blocks, but I still haven't finished. So I think step one for me right now is to figure out which ones I've finished and which ones still need to be sewn together. I think that's a finished pile. That one's finished. Those are the templates we used to cut out our curved lines to make the blocks. And so because they're not attached to the fabric anymore, I know I've sewn these ones together. All right, these two I think are partially finished. Okay, so that stack is done, but then I've got, those ones are still attached to the paper, so that still needs to be stitched. That'll be the next job. And, okay, this one has nothing partially finished. I can even see so I pinned all my bundles together the way that we were instructed to at the course, and so those blocks, those curves will need to be stitched before I can do anything with them. Because it's been so long since I started, I think I'm going to start by putting them up on the display board. We were told to bring 16 fat quarters, which I did. And I thought the easiest thing for me to do, because the point of the workshop was to learn how to sew curves. So I went to the local store, Threads That Bind in Maxwell, fantastic place, and I just bought one of their pre-made sets. That way I knew that everything was coordinated, everything matched, everything was fine, and I could just focus on the curves. All right, so step one, let's get these on the design board, just so that I can remember what it was I did 6 months ago. I think I will do this one last because it's missing one block. Okay, so let's start with these ones then. Those are the blocks that I currently have finished. I'm happy with my curved stitching. I am not happy with the blocks. I don't know if it's the colors I picked. I'm inclined to think it's the size of the blocks that I have a problem with. They're huge. I think they're about 16 inches square. A little bit, I know we bought fat quarters, but you lose a lot in the seam allowances when you're stitching curves. especially on the ends. There's quite a difference. I wonder if just the difference there between the two pieces. When I go to square these up, I'm going to lose, I mean, nearly an inch. That's the difference. So I don't know how small they're going to be by the time I do that. Maybe they'll look better once I've done that. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what to do with them now that I have them, but I know I want to do something with them. I think before I can make any decisions, I really need to finish the one at the bottom, this row of 3. 1, 2, 3. Should have one more friend, because you can see that these 4 are made from the same 4 pieces of fabric, and these 4 are made from the same 4 pieces of fabric. So my little row of 3 down here needs another friend. And then I have a whole pack here that I haven't even started. So job 1, I think, is just going to be to finish sewing them all together. And then we'll go from there and see what happens. Okay, let's get started with this pack. We'll do that one later. So there's all my templates. We don't need that right now. Okay, I'm just going to take the first one out. I already had them pinned from the workshop when I cut them up to begin with. Job 1 is trying to remember, that's a corner, so that's going to be this way. How these fit together? Oh, it does not. No, let's go this way. No, that doesn't look right either. Let's see if this one fits. This is what happens when you start something 6 months ago. Oh, okay, good. That lines up. That lines up. And that lines up. Okay, so these are the curvy seams that I'm going to need to stitch together. But because this has been folded up in a Ziploc bag for so long, I think I'm going to give it a quick press before I start pinning it together. Okay, the pieces have been pressed. There's no rhyme or reason to which seam you choose to sew first. I like to do the 2 on the edge and then the 1 in the middle. So I'm going to move these over, get to those later. Step 1 is to turn these over without accidentally changing your orientation. And I want to get them both onto one mat. Okay, the next step is to use some sort of writing tool. Where did I put it? Here it is. I have a few different ones, as sort of happens when you're sewing, you collect things. This is the one I like to use the most. I find it most effective. It's called Allery's Chalk Cartridge Set, and you can put different colors inside. And it does have an eraser on the end, but I haven't used it, and it's kind of gone hard. So for this step, you're just putting a little marker line, very small, across the 2 pieces of fabric, so that when you get yourself to the sewing machine and everything starts to move on you, which it will do, you can make sure that you are matched up properly. We'll do pinning in a moment, but it's going to look quite scary when I pin it. It's all going to be scrunched up funny as it goes around the corners, the curves. Okay, I probably put my markers about an inch apart, some a bit wider, some a bit smaller. Then, right sides together, this is the fun bit. So now I need to pin it, but of course as soon as I do right sides together, you end up with nothing matching. And that's what the marker is for. I'm going to find
my matching ones, I like to start at the third one in. I find it too fiddly to do the corner first. So I'm finding my two. Move. There we go. So I've put this pin exactly where the marker is on both sides. Now I can go back and just sort of fiddle with those first ones. And the corner does get tricky because it's on a curve. There we go. And then as I go to sew it, it's going to be a very slow process as I not force the fabric through the machine, but I'm going to try and get just from one pin to the next pin. I'm not worried about, you know, sewing the whole length of the seam. Just get to the next pin without anything going wrong. I'm starting with just putting a pin at each marker. I might then come back once I've taken a look at it and put some extra pins in where I think it might be necessary, or I might find that it's fine just the way it is and it doesn't need any more. If you are new to sewing curves, what we were recommended at the course was that you start with very gentle curves, more of a wave, until you get the hang of it. And then you can start doing more aggressive curves, something closer to a wiggle. These are all technical terms, I'm sure. This is Rachel at Patterns and Pixels Canada, where we like to make up sewing terms. Again. Nearly there. 3 more markers to go. Now doing this last one is going to be a lot of fiddling because you can see how off these two edges are from each other. And I need to push that blue one, that blue piece of fabric, to match up with the marker. So that way my raw edges line up, which is why sewing curves can take longer than other types of sewing that you might be doing. Okay. All right, so this is where it's wonky. I can't actually even lay it down flat because of the way it's been pinned together. I think here, at this point, because I can see the sort of tan fabric poking through over it, I'm going to put some extra pins there just to force the raw edges to be lined up with one another. And I want to avoid getting any, there we go, nips or tucks or anything. So there's a little bit of stretching and convincing and encouraging the fabric to do what I want. Let's take a look again. Okay, I think I'm happy with the rest of that. So now comes the job of sewing everything together. So I'm going to move the camera so that you can see that. For this one, because my ends don't line up perfectly, I'm actually going to start stitching sort of between these two pins, and then I'll come back and do that bit afterwards. Otherwise I could find it pulls to the machine. Like I said, it's a very slow process. I'm just checking that my fabric is lined up just to the next pin. And I've just had a thought. I think I'm going to shorten my stitch length. There we go. check it again, just between here and the next pin. And then repeat that process all the way to the end. Got to that end, let's just go back. I'm going to turn this over and finish this side. Let's take a look. Checking the back first for any pulls. There's a bit there. I'll see what it looks like on the front, if I'm going to be happy with it. No, I think that'll be fine once it's pressed. Okay, let's do that job next. Let's get the seam pressed before we do the next one. For this project, I'm choosing to press my seams open, but you're more than welcome to press to the dark. And remember, pressing is just that, it's pressing. So I'm just opening the seams with my fingers, and then I come in with the iron and press. I don't want to end up stretching my fabric by pulling the iron across it. Now here's where that little pull is, so I'm going to just make sure it's sitting the way I want. And I think that will sort it. I'll check from the front in a moment. Okay, let's take a look. Oh, that looks good to me. That's where the pull is, but you can't even see it now. An extra little press. And I had said earlier in the video that I'm going to lose a lot with squaring up my blocks. So let me just take a look in the camera, make sure it's focusing. See if I can fix that. There, so you can see when you sew a curve, it won't line up. It's you haven't made a mistake, it's just not going to. So that's what one side looks like. And that's the other side. Which is why when I go to square up all of my blocks, I'm going to lose quite a bit. So I think they're about 16 inches now. We'll see what they are when I'm finished. Okay, just a few hundred more seams to go, and then I'll have all my blocks done. Okay, I've got the last few blocks sewn together. This one will be the final one in the group of 4 down at the bottom. And then these ones were a set of 4 that I hadn't stitched at all together yet. Funny enough, I actually found this one more challenging than the other ones. And I think this might show it best. This curved piece here, the cream colored one, it had enough of a curve to it that I did struggle to get it to go through, to stitch along that curve in such a way that I wouldn't end up with tucks and pulls. I have sewn them all together. They're okay. They're not as good as the other blocks that I've done. These ones have more of a soft wave on them, whereas this one this center bit really did have quite a turn to it. And as I've said previous, when you're sewing curves, a soft wave would be a good place to start. Once you start moving into things that have more of a definite turn to them is when it does get tricky, putting it through the sewing machine so that you don't get pulls and tucks. And I'm just surprised, when I drew this design, I didn't think that was much of a curve. But it really did make a difference when I was trying to sew them. Anyway, job now is to get these last few up on the board so I can decide what I'm going to do next with my blocks. I've said to you before that I really don't like these blocks. I like the experience for trying to sew the curves, but now I'm left with these giant blocks and no pattern of what to do with them. And they're just not speaking to me right now. However, I will think of something. Okay, I think the first thing I'm going to do is get them all off the board and square them up because they are quite wonky. To do that, I'll take them all down, I'll measure all of them, and I'll figure out which one is the smallest, and then I will trim all of them to match that size. Yeah, let's do that first. And then maybe inspirational strike. And I'll think of something to do with these giant blocks. Ugh. Okay, I've measured all of my blocks and it looks like 16.5 inches will be the size that I will be trimming them all to. So naturally I need to go and get myself a ruler that will help me do that. And if your sewing room is anything like mine, you have everything except the size ruler that you need. So I knew I had a bunch of squares and I thought, okay, well, I'll just go get a square. I've got a 4.5, a 6.5, a 9.5, 12.5, 14.5, and a 20. So of course, not the size that I need at all. And then I've got a few of the longer ones, which means we'll be using this. I also, this is my cutting mat. I used to live in a very teeny tiny little apartment, and this cutting mat was perfect to fit on my kitchen table, which was where I used to do my sewing. Now I have a bit more space, but I haven't gotten around to buying myself a bigger mat because I just walk over to that side of the sewing palace and I steal my mom's bigger cutting mat. She does have ones that are even larger than this, but I didn't need a bigger one. This one will be fine. It's handy being able to do that. So, in terms of cutting these down to the size that I need, move these ones over. I just need to get myself a straight edge. It's not too bad squaring up something that is this small. It's more challenging when you're dealing with a larger quilt. And so right now I've just chosen a line on my cutting mat that I'm going to use as my starting point. And I will get the ruler. I obviously want to keep as much fabric as possible. So the first one that I cut, yeah, I mean, the way the fabric is curving, I can't get any closer than this. So this will be my starting point to give me a straight edge to work with. And you'll notice since my last video, I have finally changed the blade in my rotary cutter. Now that I've got my straight edge to work with, I can now line this edge up with the line on the cutting mat. So I know that my bottom is perfectly straight. This is one of those pieces where, because there's two curved lines on this edge, I'm going to lose from here, from the dark blue to the brown. It's about 3/4 of an inch difference, just from sewing that curved seam. So all I'm doing here is lining up with my shortest piece of fabric, which looks like it'll be there. So I'm making sure the bottom is straight against the edge that I know is straight on my fabric. And I'm losing quite a lot of the blue, but I'm just making it with the brown piece here. Okay, now I've got two perfectly straight edges. Now is where I can line up with the center on my cutting mat, the zero on my cutting mat, to get my 16.5 inches, hopefully. Yeah, so instead of trying to cut this time to keep as much fabric as possible, now I'm lining up with where the 16.5 inch marker is on this side. And it's one of those, what do they say? Measure twice, cut once. So I'm still straight along the bottom, still straight along the side, 16.5 at the top, 16.5 at the bottom. And I like to hold my ruler when it's something this small in the middle. I find I'm less likely to have it shift. If I'm doing a longer cutting edge, I might cut a little bit, move my hand, cut a little bit, move my hand, but something that's, that's where the seam is, and I did not press hard enough. That was the other thing, I don't know if you noticed, I didn't take my hand off the ruler while I was scooping up the fabric, because I have done that in the past where I've moved this hand, gone to scoop the fabric, only to then realize that I haven't cut all the way through, and I've pulled the fabric, and because my hand isn't holding it tight anymore, it shifts. So I have learned from experience that I keep my hand pressed down on that ruler until I get the fabric completely off, then I move my hand. Okay, so I now have 3 sides that are fine. This dimension here is 16.5. I now just need to do it on my final side, so matching up with the 0 down here. And here's another one where the difference between this corner here with the blue and the pink at the top is quite significant. So I'm matching up my ruler with the 16.5 inch mark. A little peek there just to make sure I'm in the right spot. Okay, that side is straight, that side is straight. We're still 16.5 at the top. Okay, hand in the middle. Now I'm going over one seam here, so I'm going to push a little harder just to make sure. Okay, so keep this hand down, scoop all the fabric off, and then I can take my hand off, and I'm now left with a block that is 16.5 inches square. Just need to do this to all the other ones now. Okay, I've cut all of the blocks, I've squared them all up to 16.5 inches, and I've already put them back on the design board, and I chose to sort of jumble them up this time when I put them on the board. I like it more than I did before, and it would be fine. I could certainly just sew them together like this, and then it would be probably like a couch throw or something like that. But it's just, it's not doing it for me. It is not doing it for me. I'm wondering if maybe just a little sashing would help. Let me go see what I've got in the cupboards. So I've grabbed just a few pieces of fabric I had kicking around in the cupboard. Normally I want to work with something a bit smaller than this, but we'll see. So when I'm saying sashing, I'm thinking just, like, do I just put something, it's not bad, or do I just outline it in a cream or a pink, and then just have each of the squares, I mean, it would make it a little bit bigger. I could do a border on it as well. I did grab, so I think creams and pinks would definitely do. Wasn't sure about the blue. Oh, no, that's the wrong shade. We would need something more, is this tealy? Oh, it is. Ooh, nope. Okay, so those ones aren't going to work. Is that too pink? It's not bad. I don't know if it would clash a bit. And then it's like wrapped. Oh, it's not as brown as I thought. It's got more gray in it. Oh gosh, no. Okay, nope. No. I like the shade, but I think the pattern's too busy. I think the sash needs to be more solid. I did grab a green, but I'm already not liking this. No, I think if I was going to do it, it would be something in the creams, or possibly, and something that, like, that's a solid. This one has a very subtle pattern. I'm still not, and this point is just, it's personal preference, right? I'm sure there's some of you watching that would just happily sew this together and it would be fine, it would work. There's some that would be happy to do sashing around the blocks, which would also be fun, and it would also work. But it's not working for me. I like the Reach for the Stars quilt that I'm working on. And if you haven't seen that, I'll link it below. Where you've got the center medallion and all the blocks are different, and it's just, now that's an idea. What if I do a center medallion? What if, oh, what if, okay, this is obviously not what I would use on this quilt, but this is the center medallion for the Reach for the Stars quilt. What if, for argument's sake, I make a center medallion? I can get more fabric, because then I could turn these on point instead of having it straight on. Does that work? Does that give me something a bit funkier? Okay, you know what? I'm gonna pause the video for a second. I'm gonna move all of these and see if this is gonna work. So I have literally just thrown these up without thinking about it. I don't know. Do I make a center medallion of some sort for this quilt and then turn all the pieces on point? I obviously didn't turn the bottom ones, I was just looking at the top. It already feels like it has a little bit something going on, something a bit more than just sewing squares together. They're also still just really big blocks. They're really big blocks. And it's a bit tricky to visualize this quilt. I would never use these fabrics with these ones. I just happen to have this center medallion from the Reach for the Stars quilt handy to use as sort of like a visual aid to help me in this. But see, I could do that and then still have a little bit of sashing going around. Of course, that would then make the blocks even bigger. What if my issue with these blocks is their size? What if I cut them? That would make them, what did I say? They're 16 and a half. So they'd be 8 and a quarter. Yeah, do squares. It's a nice size, isn't it? Oh, it's a big step. Oh, I don't know if I could do that. I spent all this time sewing all of these together, then squaring them up, and now I'm considering, now see, this is interesting. Just a quick fold. This one's ended up with 3 pieces of fabric showing on the fold. This one only has 2, obviously on that side. I get 3 there. Well, I'm intrigued. Do I cut them? Oh, do I cut them? Do I cut them? Because that's not something you can undo. If I do that, I have to be wholly committed. And then if I do cut them, then what? I still don't have a pattern. That one's got a big section of, what if I fold it in? So I am going to end up, if I have each of these cut into 4, I'm going to have some that just have 2 pieces of fabric showing. I'll have some that have 3. And of course, I hadn't planned on cutting them. If I'm going to be cutting blocks that I've made, I use a shorter stitch. It just reduces the likelihood that you're going to have your seams undo when you cut them. And I didn't sew these with a short stitch because I wasn't planning on cutting them. Which means I could have some unravel a little bit at the ends. But I do like that size a lot better. Okay, I think what I'm going to have to do is sort of leave this video here. I'm not going to cut them yet. I'm going to fold them all in half, or in quarters, and leave them up on the design board and have a really, really long think about it. I'm going to sleep on it before I decide whether or not I'm going to cut them. But I'm already liking that size a lot better than the 16 and a half. Ooh. Okay. I'm going to leave it here. And I'm going to think about it. And at some point in the future, there will be another video where we find out whether or not I cut these blocks. You know what to do. If you like the videos that I've been making so far and you want to see more and you want to find out what I decide to do with these ones, then you hit that like, subscribe, and bell notification. Bye.